Okay. I think we're up. It's gonna be a more chill stream. I've been building a lot, and I wanted to make this one. Let's have our sketch pad. My thinking grounds. Because I think this is really important. Because there's a lot of content out there that I've done recently. Only been shooting for a month, but I've done it too. Where it's just telling you how to get a job, how to scheme, how to just like how to learn how to code. Hold on a second. How to learn how to code and how to do all this stuff. And really, what matters isn't so much all that stuff of the politics and like the yada yada yada. Everyone I know that doesn't have to worry about getting a job or doesn't have to worry about opportunity and all this stuff, they went through the same rite of passage, quote unquote. And what they really did is they learned how to get good. And that's more important than anything. So let's just talk about the skill. Let's talk about how to get good at a skill. And you know, a lot of this stuff you can use for other things, of course. You can use it for whatever you're doing. You know, it doesn't need to be this, but we're going to talk about coding. So first, let's define coding. What is coding? What is coding? And I'll say computer coding. Because, you know, there's medical coding and things like that. It means a lot of things, okay? What is computer coding? Well, first off, it sucks. No, just kidding. What is it? Because a lot of us, and I get it. You're going to want to skip this part, but really just try to follow through. I get it. You're like, I know what coding is, but really, do you? Do you? What are you actually doing when you're on a Python tutorial? When you're on a JavaScript tutorial, you're like, oh, well, I'm getting a 10x job. I've been using 10x. You're like, oh, I'm getting a 100K job. That's why I'm on the JavaScript tutorial. I'm getting a 100K job, obviously. But what are you really doing? Okay, let's just make it to the brass tacks of things. Computer coding is making instructions. You know what I'll say? It's telling the computer what to do. That's it. But it's not so simple because you can say, oh, like I can tell the computer what to do. I can give it instructions, yada, 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 but I'm still not like productive. I'm still not making anything useful. It's like I learned all these commands. I learned how to make classes and functions, and I learned all these concepts. I know what object-oriented is. I know what functional programming is. I know what currying is. I know what encapsulation is. I know all these random concepts, but I feel like I don't know how to code. So this is for you. Listen, please. So it's not just about telling the computer what to do, because it turns out this is how I figure out ideas. I'm just like in a sketch pad, just like looking like a schizo. All right, so it turns out that coding, that the code that matters tends to be code that solves a problem. Let's make this big. So really, what we're talking about when we're talking about coding isn't so much, we're not so much talking about like, how should I say, just telling the computer what to do or instructions and getting good at telling the computer what to do. You're getting good at solving problems. Because the only reason why we have computing, this ability to make a ton of computations really fast, to process information in ways that we used to have to know in our heads and then transmit that to paper and then do a yada yada. We're now making computers do it. The whole point of it is to solve a problem. And this is a problem that means something to the world. So and not just to the world, but to a person, to someone that needs that problem solved. So really, computer coding is problem solving. And that's super important because it's like you think about it, you want to get good. You want to get to the next level of what you're doing. You have to get to the abstract, and you have to really figure out what the value of it is. So when you're getting good at coding, you're also getting good at problem solving. So when we're thinking about, when I talk about coding and all this stuff in this video, I'm going to be talking about problem solving. Are you good at solving problems? The reality is the only way to get good is to just have a high IQ. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Just kidding. Obviously, that's not that's not relevant here. That's a relative type term. You may not even fully know how intelligent you are. You may not even fully know your capacities until you take a leap of faith and start working hard. That's what really matters. Problem solving is the result of effort. Okay, so now let's go. We've defined our terms. Let's get into what it is. So let's talk about the first thing. So just a little background about myself. I have been coding for a long time. I've worked as a software engineer since I was a teenager, full time. I built a lot of projects. If you follow me, we build stuff on the stream, and I try to talk through my methodology of what I do, because I've been trying to work on the how and the why, but also the how in what I do. And when it comes to getting better and getting good, I'm going to sort of show you how I did it, whether or not it was on purpose, and also I'm saying, not saying I'm good, but I'm saying like just everyone I know who I would consider proficient. There's a through line, and I'm going to talk to you about that, all the common things in the through line. And we're also just we're going to become 10x. This is the how to become 10x video. Send it to your friends. Say, hey, you want to be 10x? Listen to this random black guy on the internet. Friends like, what? All right, so let's go, and I don't know why this is centered, but that's fine. Okay, so the first things first, you have to learn the fundamentals. Oh, boring. And actually, this isn't even, I made this number one here. This list isn't going to be particularly ordered, but this is really important. Actually, I want to say you have to prioritize learning. Let's just say the fundamentals. You have to prioritize the fundamentals. What I mean by that isn't so much it's like, oh, okay, like I have to just always be writing in assembly for everything. It's like that's the fundamentals, right? It's the lowest level. I always have to be doing something that's actually inefficient, to be building a website using assembly, right? Or building a web server. What I'm saying here, when I'm saying prioritize fundamentals, is you have to be, whenever you're learning a new thing, you have to always be pathologically trying to know how it works. So really, you know what? I want to rename this Learn How Things Work. But actually, let's just keep it prioritize fundamentals. I think is a little bit of a better way to talk about it. You have to prioritize the fundamentals. So what I mean by that is, like, when you're learning Rust or Python or whatever program you're doing, and you don't understand a concept, you have to be like, I have to know what that is. If you don't have that drive to have to know things, it's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard for you to get good. And not just having to know it to have to know it, but have to know it so that you can apply it later. You can practice. And now, let's get to this part. So this is really important. I want to talk about this because a lot of people don't get this. You have to code a lot. It's true. It's true. This one is like, I feel like people don't get it. If you're wondering who I'm talking to, I don't know. Myself. Okay, so you have to code a lot. And what I mean by a lot is you have to train. Just like any skill where it's like you're getting excellent at something, you have to train. It's a game. Coding is a game. Any problem solving task is a game. So you have to. My suggestion is you should be coding at least 1 hour a day if you're in a process of trying to get better at it. So do lead code problems. So like solve a lot of problems. Really, this is just AKA solve more problems. So you should be solving more problems. You're not solving enough problems. I know you're not. I know you're not. You're like, oh, I solve a ton of problems. No, you don't. You don't. Do the lead code. Don't be one of those people that say, oh, lead code sucks. No, solving problems is good. It's a very accessible way for you to get problems. A lot of people naturally solve problems because they're trying to build a project, and the project throws them their inspiration, which we'll talk about in a second, to build this project, gave them a ton of problems that they can naturally solve. So they're doing a ton of lead code, you know what I mean? But the thing is, it depends on what type of problem you're trying to solve. And we'll get into that in a second or in a minute. But the real important thing when you're trying to get good at coding it's not about just doing a ton of tutorials. It's about solving a lot of problems. So solve more. Like think about, let me just make this a point. Think about how many problems you're solving over time. So it's like per hour, per day. How many problems do you solve per day? You don't have to be like religious about it. You don't have to log it, but it's like position yourself. So think of projects, right? Think of projects. First principles, Jared Drop of Wisdom. Yeah. The real trick to lead code is using it to practice problem solving without making lead code a crutch. 100% Nitro. 100%. The thing about lead code, 100%. And by the way, ask any questions in the chat. I'll just like run through it, and I'll build this list based on just the conversation. Just like there's a few things I want to go through, but yeah, no, it's so true. Like lead code isn't like you don't grind lead code. You just use it as an easy way. It's like Big Macs it's like fast food for problem solving. It's of convenience for you to have access to problems to solve. For me, like I don't really approach problem solving like that. Like that's not growing up when I was learning how to code. Like I learned through building projects. I was obsessed with getting the thing I just wrote down on a piece of paper to come to life. And actually, I want to talk about that let's actually talk about that now. Follow through on your intuitions. This might be the first one. This might be the most important thing. Let's make this a conversation, though. If anyone has questions or comments, please let a brother know. So like weightlifting analogy, lead code equals machines, building projects, free weights. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I always take building project approach that just lead code. Yeah, that's me too. I build projects. That's where I get my problem solving in. But that's super important. So like when you're getting good, quote unquote, you got to think about how you're positioning yourself. So like, and when I say positioning, I feel like I say that a lot, and I should talk about what I mean by that. Is whenever you make a decision on what to do, you're positioning yourself for potential. So like, for instance, let me give an example here. So if I say I want to learn how to be a good architect, maybe I can move to, I don't know, like what's like a famous, I can move to Paris and I can see like all these incredible buildings every day and be surrounded by all these buildings. If you learn how to be an architect in Paris versus some random place in South Jersey, you're probably gonna be better positioned to be around architects and good architecture there. So you're giving yourself more potential. So when we're talking about projects, think of please do this. Think of projects that will, one, you want to do it, but two, that you will be in good positioning to solve problems that will help you get good. So this part's super important right here. So follow through on your intuitions. What I mean by this is really what I mean is build things you want to build, work on things you want to work on, but follow through is the most important thing when it comes to getting good at really anything. So like I'll give a good kind of story around this. It's like maybe, or analogy, maybe you're someone who's trying to get better at basketball and you see a video of, like, you're watching the Olympics and you see a video of like or you see a clip of the gymnastic people, and you look at their explosiveness and you're like, wow, I think I could be able to jump higher if I like learned what they did. You know what that is? That's an intuition. And if you go and implement that, if you go and add that to your training routine, you're following through on it, right? Maybe you add some gymnastics to your training routine. Don't know if that's actually good for basketball. I was more of a football kid, but that's in general what I mean here. So if you be really, really used to acting on your intuitions, because part of that problem solving, when you see someone constantly solving problems like live, like in an interview, like someone's tossing you problems and you're thinking of those problems, that's intuitive thinking. And the more you train intuitive thinking, the better. So, and also this gets into another part, build features. I know this one's obvious. You're like, what? Yeah, duh. Obviously, I'm going to build features. But what I mean is, I should like make that a little clearer, just in case anyone's watching. So like the build features thing is super important. So like, this is a better way to word this. So when I say build features, that's like obvious, but so build features as you code. Is that a good build features as you code? Full features. I think so. Really, I'll describe what I'm saying. So often when we're coding, we get a list of things to do, make ourselves a to-do list, and we sort of say, okay, I'll build the front. Let's take a full stack application. I'll build the front end, and then I'll build the back end. Within the front end, I'll build the CSS, and I'll build the HTML, and I'll also build the functionality after I do that. And then I'm done the front end, and then I'll go and implement the back end. That's fine, but in my opinion, when you're trying to get better, you should focus on not just chunking things out, like saying, oh, let me build this whole thing and then switch context and then build this. You should be combining the context of the whole thing so you get used to systems thinking as you're coding. I hope that makes sense. Maybe I should think of the whole system as you code. So the reason why, and I'm not saying this is actually the best thing to do, like if you had a team of people, because if I had a team of people, I'm giving people ownership over different pieces and all that. But when it comes to getting good, getting used to always thinking about what the system is doing as you're building your functions and always like as you're implementing full features. So you're wiring up the API, you're building the endpoint, you're building the front end, and then you finish that feature and you do all this, and you're kind of going back and forth. You get to manage state. So the whole point of this is to get good at managing state. The reason why is because you have to be very productive if you're on a job, especially, but also if you want to make your own stuff, you have to be very productive every hour. The best way to be productive is to train your mind to be able to manage the state of what's going on. So like so a good way of saying that is like you can every stopping point. Okay, this is a good way of saying it. Every stopping point you're going to have when you're building out a system is always going to be, well, I'll say half of the time, just to be safe, is going to be because you lost the script on what the state is. Your state, you're in a logical loop or fallacy. The logic's broken, and you're confused because you didn't manage the state in your head. And by the way, I'm saying you should train to be good at this, ideally. And part of doing that is building out features where tons of parts of the system are together, and you get to manage what's going on, and you get to create these pathways in your head to go back and be like, oh, actually, I need to implement this, and oh, I didn't implement this, and you get to go back and forth between a ton of different things. Building things like that helped me a lot. Number 4 reminds me of the difference between slow thinking and fast thinking. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So like the thing with, let's actually go back to follow through your intuitions. Yeah. So when it comes to following through it is like a slow thinking, fast thing. You have to be able to intuitively see something. So I talked about it in the macro. I'm like, okay, you need to be, if you see something that would work for you, you should implement that. Maybe in how you get good. You see a guy who did this and you do that. That's fine. But as you're coding, if you have an intuition, you have to be really good at just doing it. If you're like, let's say you're building out a React component for a calendar or whatever, and you're like, this is taking a long time, immediately look up a library to work on it. Be a little knee-jerk reaction and follow through on that, and keep deep diving. Oh yeah, deep diving. Got to go into that. So deep diving. The following your intuitions one, I may not have to rename that one, but it is important to think. It's really just be an intuitive thinker. That's just what it is. Let's see, 5, you basically code yourself in a hole and it makes it hard to re-implement. Yeah. So what I mean is not so much. Tony sent a message. So like it's not so much. Yeah. So okay. Cool. So yeah, Tony, I'll do that. So you basically code yourself in the hole. It makes it hard to re-implement the code into the overall project. Yeah. So the number 5 is pretty much, it's not so much that you're doing something wrong. It's a method. So it's the method for how you go about coding. So it's like you need to get better at not missing and not breaking the logic in your head. You need to be better at holding logic. And the best way to do that is to understand the state and to know all the different states and how they interact, and to manage state in your head as you're coding. So know what you're storing and why you're storing it and what's using it. I know that sounds super complicated. It's super intuitive. The way to do this, the way to get good, don't think too complicated at all about it. The way to get good at this is to build whole features over and over and over again. So don't, you have your context switching be just a shorter and shorter time frame. So get context switching, just forget about it. Let me actually just add to this. So get better at context switching. Does that make sense? So this number 5, the whole point of this one is you can get better at context switching. All right, let's talk about deep diving. So the deep diving is important. So deep diving is really what that is you have this concept of okay, I'll give you a scenario. You're learning Django and you see the idea of a data model in the documentation. You don't know what that is, but you have to build a Django project. I would suggest doing a deep dive on what data models are, on why it's important. And then if you do that, you're going to learn about what MVC is. So you're going to learn about model view controller. And then once you learn about that, you're going to learn about why. You're going to learn about templating engines. You're going to learn about business logic in the controller. You understand? You're going to be learning about more and more things. You're going to learn about what business logic is. You're going to keep. So that's why it's a deep dive. Is you start with a concept you don't understand. You just keep escalating, and you got to do this a lot. I mean, that's like that never ends. And the best people are people that deep dive because they want to, because they're so curious. Like if you spend a lot of time doing that in your training, you're going to be really good. You're going to be really prepared for a job or to be an effective engineer. Because an effective engineer is someone that can do all this stuff very efficiently. So the way they deal with time is better. Good engineers, like a lot of engineers can solve problems. Good engineers are time effective. And they're good at communicating. Okay, so, and I don't just mean, be super fast. I mean, like time effective. That makes sense. Okay, cool. So deep diving now 7. So let's go. So, I have a lot of things to talk about. Oh, yeah, this is super, super important. 80-20 projects. I thought of this concept earlier today, and this is important. Yeah, if you're confused about anything, definitely ask me. I will clarify for a while. I will go in. But okay, 80-20 projects. What do I mean by an 80-20 project? I thought of this concept earlier today. This is after you can already code and you've already built maybe a project. And you have an idea of a focus of something to build. And you don't know what to build next. Think of a project that 80% of it you understand and 20% of it you don't understand. And keep building projects like that. And part of this goes into that context switching thing because you want to be constantly getting used to building things that most of it you understand, but there's a decent chunk of it that is going to be a struggle for you. This way that you're getting used to getting into that flow state of like building out features and context switching over time and in a tighter loop, right? And you're getting used to the time management and all that, but you're also pushing yourself further. And it's also fun because you're getting competence in this. So build like a streamline of projects where it's like back to back. You're taking like some concepts, most that you understand, like mostly, and then you're just adding on like a fifth of it or whatever. It could be 60-40 or whatever, but there's a chunk of it that you have no idea how it's going to work. It might be now you're doing live streaming. Now you're doing WebRTC. Now you're doing sockets or whatever. I just did like three things that are like the same thing. But, or maybe it's like, okay, I'm going to build a mobile app for my project. Like I already knew how to do the whole thing, but this time I'll also build a mobile app. Something that's sort of pushing you like that is always a good thing to do. And think about that with actually anything you're doing where that first 80%, like you need to get used to being good and feeling like you're good at something a lot. It's just good feedback for yourself. But also you don't want to get lazy and weak and bad, right? So you want to have that 20% where you're pushing yourself, right? Okay, so that's really important. And let's see. Okay, yeah, this part's super important. So this one's big. And I know everyone says this. They say it because it's true. Build and contribute to open source software. If you're not doing it, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know why you're not doing this. That's you. That's a you problem. Why aren't you contributing open source if you're trying to? And this could be posting your own projects. But there's a social component to excellence in getting better at something. And this goes for across all domains. So this goes, you're learning how to be good at baseball, right? Whatever it is, you have to be getting feedback from people that know what they're talking about more than you. So I would suggest building your own projects, posting at places, and getting feedback and asking for feedback. I would also ask you to consider finding an open source project that you use, that you're interested in, and making a PR. Or not even just making a PR, go to their forum and start talking in their forum and asking questions. And then on a GitHub issue that is related to your bug, try to actually fix the bug in their open source project. Get used to building from source in whatever environment you're in, whether you're a Python dev or if you do Golang, whatever. Get used to building projects from source using whatever build tools they have. Get used to that so you don't have that like, oh, I don't even know how to load Chromium to fix a bug. Like, I don't even understand that. No, that's weakness. That's the weakness in your head. No, just do it. Okay. And once you do things like this, so I'm like, I don't know why I care that this one is like smaller, but that's pathological. But yeah, you want to be constantly engaging with other engineers. Really, this part is like an aspect where it's like you need to be in an environment with common coders. You'd be surprised how much better you'll get if you're with other passionate people. If you're not surrounded by passionate people with what you do, you're positioned so poorly. Because the spark inside of you with whatever you do, it's going to be damaged at some point. And you need to have that. It's good to have an environment. Maybe won't say you need, but it's good to have an environment in which you can be like, wow, that's great. I can see greatness. You know, train like Goku. Okay. Go to Master Roshi's island. I mean, you know, he's kind of a perv, but you get what I'm saying. Give him some magazines. All right, so next up, building from source seems awesomeness, share your wisdom. How much time should be spent on LeetCode versus building problems? So the time spent on LeetCode versus building projects, I mean, LeetCode versus building projects. That's the question. So that's a sort of complicated question because it's really not answerable. It's kind of just what you like to do. There's some people that they're just like really, there's people out there that, especially competitive, like coding competitors, that they just love doing things like LeetCode. And then, but I'd say 90% of people just like building projects. But when you say how much time should be spent on LeetCode versus building projects, It's a complicated question because it's like it depends on what you want to do. If you want to get a FANG job, building a ton of projects when you don't have an environment and you're not in any CS competitive program, it's going to be very hard. So the LeetCode is going to help you a lot. If you do want to get like a FANG job or a job that's big in tech, it's going to doing LeetCode is going to help you a lot because a lot of those people, they're going to vet you based on your problem solving skills, and they're going to pick an algorithm from that, maybe not from LeetCode, but they're going to pick a derivative of one of those algorithms. So you have to really weigh the cost on what you're trying to do. LeetCode's anything. So like you can get good at algorithmic work by simply building projects that require a lot of algorithmic work. Are you building a peer-to-peer network like from scratch? Like, yeah, you're going to probably get pretty good at graph theory. You know what I mean? Like it depends on what you're trying to do. Like if you do certain types of problems, you don't have to do things like LeetCode to do well in interviews. But to get good, it really depends on, like, none of that even matters. You just need to be solving more problems over time. That's it. What are those problems? Like, depends on your position. It depends on which problems you pick and what LeetCode problems you do or whatever. I would suggest always just do projects because you're going to like that. Probably. Building from source seems to be the biggest hurdle to contributing to open source. The actual PRs seem relatively straightforward most of the time. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, really get used to building from source, because you'd be surprised how many people have never ever done that in a project nowadays, especially with the way GitHub is set up, or not just GitHub, but the way package managers are set up, where everything's in package managers, which is great, but getting used to building from source is really important if you want to contribute in whatever environment you're doing. So learn the environment. Like if you're a Python guy, learn about virtual environments, learn about the system that you're in, learn about how to set up, learn about what eggs are, learn about PyPy. So 9. So I want to talk about, this is, maybe I should merge follow your intuitions with this, but follow your curiosity. Always. So this, I know this one's hokey. This one's like, I sound like I'm like, I don't know. I sound like such a, just like that guy saying that. Like I said, like that sounds like follow your curiosity. It sounds like what someone says when they're trying to get you to, do something you probably shouldn't do. that's what the guy says at the end of the date for the girls. It's like, but that's not it's not what I'm saying. Oh, just follow your curiosity. Here's a beer. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is really, really important. When you're like, think about the first reason why you wanted to code. Keep escalating on that. So maybe you saw like something and you thought it'd be cool to build, like whatever project, even if it was just to get a job or whatever project you think would be cool, please just build it. Just build it. Whatever project, like if you think it'd be cool if something existed, please build it. Please. And then apply the 80-20 rule to your next projects, where 20% of that project is pushing yourself. So let's say you make first game you make is this like whatever game. Second game is going to be 20% harder for you to make. Maybe you have to deal with, this is the first time dealing with 3D assets in this project. Okay, so like following your curiosity is so important, because you get to have a inspiration. It's like why do we build, right? Like we build because like it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful opportunity to be able to create something and to be able to put your heart and soul into making something that you didn't think you could either do or could exist. And the great thing about software engineering and coding is that we get a lot of access to that. So we get to do that from our laptops. Super amazing. It's a gift. And being good at it in our time is, for me, like, I see that as like a wonderful adventure to go to. So, and I get it. I get it. I get it. I get how I sound. But I promise I'm not trying to sell you a course. Okay. I'm not trying to get you in a van. But really think about, like, if you're inspired by anything in software, please build it. And if you're curious, keep doing that, because a lot of people, they start learning how to code and then they do it for 3 to 6 months, or they do it for 2 whatever years. And then and I'll be like talking to people like mentees and people like that are asking me questions, and then it'll be someone that, like, they used to do this and they're trying to get back. It's always people trying to get back into it. And I'm always thinking, it's like, I can look at why you stopped, and it's because you weren't inspired by it. You were just trying to get a job. And I get it. I understand the financial incentive for that. But the amount of people I know who are self-taught and got good being self-taught purely for the financial incentive is really low. A lot of it was because people love it. So this part is about love. You gotta love it, you know? You gotta love the build. And whenever you're building something, you're contributing to something very beautiful. You're contributing to greatness. Oh no, the 9 is out of line. Get back in there. Get back in there. All right, so 10. Did I already do this one? I didn't do this one? Huh. Okay. I did a lot of them, but this one's very important. I said this one. I wrote an article where I said this one because I was like, people have to know. Code for an hour a day, at least. You don't have to do this for your whole life. I get it. But when you're, like, trying to get to the next level, you should be reiterating a lot of these concepts in your head over and over and over again. So when you're coding, you're especially if you're new to this, you're dealing with, like, a way of thinking that's new. If you don't have consistency when you're trying to think a different way, or in a way that's challenges the way you currently think, like, you have to, like, that whole state context switching thing. We don't naturally think in a way where we have to be applying something to a specific linear function and also managing a global context, managing a whole system at the same time. It's not that intuitive. So, like, you have to be constant. You have to have consistency. So it's like people will learn to code by, like, oh, like, every weekend I do this or whatever. I think it's much better to have, even if it's just a small amount of time every day while you're in that training mode, to be consistently devoting time to thinking like a coder. Because when you're thinking consistently in a different way every single day, it's a compounding effect. Because it seems like, oh, what? You want me to do this every day? What am I, Marcus Aurelius? I don't have that discipline. Yeah, well, you're an adult now. Doing something every day is like this hack that we don't, I feel like in our society, it's like, and I get it because I'm all about freedom and entrepreneurship and doing all this. We have this very like kind of floaty mentality, at least in America, very creative, where it's like, oh, I gotta like follow like the wind today. And it's like, sure, but also rituals. Rituals are what sort of gets you to that next level of whatever you're doing. Like, let's say you're trying to get in good shape, you're trying to get stronger. If you have a bunch of rituals around your workout, like, oh, I do this, I drink this, whatever juice, I do not, I don't mean juice. Don't do that. I drink this like pre-workout or whatever. And I do this, I walk here, I do whatever. I listen to this song, like your list will go up. Like the ritual is very important. And I think it is good to have somewhat of a ritual when you're really in the beginning phase of getting good at something. And I think it just helps so much. And it's a discipline to it. And back to the thinking, it's like when you're trying to think a different way, like right now, I've coded enough that I can look at anything and think in the way that I would program. I'll think in a more systematic way. Like I approach a ton of things in a systematic way. So like there's a lot of benefit to that. Discipline does give you freedom, Tony. Discipline is freedom. Because the thing is like once you start wiring your brain, like I take cold showers every single morning. For like not the whole thing, but like maybe the first at least few minutes. And it's like that mental thought of jumping in. It's super simple. It's not like that hard or anything. But that mental thought of doing that every morning is something that my brain is now wired to like that. It's like it's better to proactively do that than to accidentally hate your life. Because you've been wiring your brain to go like drink every Friday for 10 years or go drinking every Friday every 10 years. So now every time Friday hits, you need to get drunk, and now you're trying to kick that habit or something. You know what I mean? It's like you should be proactively, purposefully is a better term, doing these rituals around bettering yourself. And it doesn't need to be something you don't like. Like do something for something you do like. And for coding, code for at least an hour a day. Eventually you'll be thinking about everything differently. You'll be thinking about systems differently. It's a compounding effect. It's like 110% whatever multiplier every day, 105% multiplier every day. That's going to get big eventually. Okay. So, these are the overall things. I'm going to run through these again, just so we all get it. So like you have to prioritize the fundamentals. What I mean by this is you have to have a pathological relationship to knowing how things work. You have to be like, if I don't know how this works, I suck. Okay, so and the reason why that's important is because the more you prioritize fundamentals, the more you see consistency across many different systems. It's pattern recognition. So it's like if I learn the fundamentals of C, and then I learn the fundamentals of Python and the fundamentals of Rust and the fundamentals of Golang, I'm going to start learning about what a programming language is. The definitions for things are going to become clearer to me in my intuitions. Right? Does that make sense? So next one, you have to code a lot. So this is sort of in the last one, but this is more so less about the consistency part, but more about you have to be solving more problems. Maybe the last one, that's like per day. Let's look at this one per week. Solve more problems per week. And not even that. This is even just the code for at least an hour a day. That you don't even have to be solving a problem for number 10 all the time. It could be studying. It could be whatever. For number 2, you need to be used to solving problems more often. So build projects, do LeetCode, do all that stuff deliberately. Yeah, 100%. So number 3, think about how many problems you're solving over time. So super important. So like that's kind of the same thing, actually. Uh, hold on a second. The second one, so that's kind of the same thing where I'm sort of saying the second one's actually a little different where, yeah, it solved problems. I just realized number 3 is the solve problems over time. I was describing that with number 2. Number 2 is just you need to be used to like coding, like typing code. And this makes it really easy because once you're learning new concepts, you won't have to be confused about syntax. That's really what number 2, a lot of what number 2 is about. Okay, so number 4, follow through on your intuitions. You have to be training yourself to be an intuitive thinker. That means is when you see, oh, maybe I should do this to solve this problem, do it. It's probably going to fail a lot, but you have to be, this is training yourself to think intuitively. Okay, so if you think something's going to help or work, just start doing it. Do that a lot. And then this one's hard to explain, but I'm telling you, the intuitive thinking is a lot of what separates the man from the boys when it comes to this type of thing. Build features as you code. This one took me a little while to kind of relay, but this is really about get used to context switching in a closer loop. So get used to working on multiple parts of a system at the same time. I'm not saying that's a good way to like design your development process. What I mean is, as you're learning, the more you're used to completing whole features in a system and that has a lot of things together, the easier you're going to get at that systems thinking, at that associative thinking. The more you're going to be able to manage the global state of your program as you're developing this one function's logic. Does that make sense? So you're training yourself to really be able to get in a flow more as you're coding. So deep diving. So deep diving is super important. So like the overall deep diving is sort of saying, okay, now I'm going to focus on this. Like I'm learning, like the Django example, I'm learning one concept. There's another concept that I have no idea how this works. I'm going to learn every single thing I need to learn about this concept. I don't know how it works. And I'm going to keep learning about those things within that thing that don't work. I'm going to keep going in a little rabbit hole until I'm and still be hungry. Don't be like, oh, I'm done. I know how this whole thing works. 80-20 projects. Your projects, try to have your projects not all just be random things that don't kind of go together. Try to take something that you sort of understand now, build a project that 80% of it is stuff you're understanding and 20% of it's pushing yourself, and try to keep building projects like that. It doesn't have to only build projects like that, but as you're getting better at this, try to focus on that. Build and contribute to open source. So you got to be social. You got to get out there. That's super important, actually, because some people are actually very smart. It would have been great, but they were just isolated. So, and that's unfortunate. But also, like, some people are isolated and they're totally fine. I'm not saying you have to be social. It's just that it helps a lot to have good people look at your code and be like, that's bad. Okay, so, and you could do it on the internet. You don't have to like there's internet now. So you just post on a forum. Like when I was a kid, I would literally post my code to forums to see what they would think, and they'd be like, you're an idiot. And I'd be like, oh. Now I'd be really mad. And then I'd get in flame wars. And they're like, is this a child? Why does his grammar so bad? Okay, so follow your curiosity always. So you gotta part of the love and passion in anything Like some people are really passionate because they follow through on their curiosities more. That's really it. Because passion for something often comes from poking at the world, seeing something come back, and liking it. A lot of people, it's very hard to become passionate just by reading about, uh, especially like an engineering, like something that's very action oriented. It's hard to become passionate about that just by reading books about it. Over time, like maybe you have a year where you're just so passionate about, I don't know, like astronomy. But if you never get a telescope, it's going to be very hard for you to maintain that. Like the practice and the following of the curiosity, that stuff breeds the passion. And then you start getting a feedback loop where you're poking and you're getting stuff out. You're poking, you're getting stuff out, and you're like, wow, what can I poke next? It's not what I wanted that to sound like. You get what I'm saying. All right, code for at least an hour a day, discipline, consistency. The more rituals you have around something that you care about, the more powerful that thing is. Like people are beings of worship. You should worship coding. And it sounds funny, but it goes for anything you want to do. It's like you want to get good at something. There should be an element of worship to it. It's like these rituals, like part of why rituals are important in religious practices is because whenever we plan to do a thing, even if it's like doesn't make sense, like even if it's like if it's like, oh, I have to like wear my like pants this way, I have to wear my pants inside out before I go to the gym or something. It's like, even if it's like that, it's like, wow, I think a part of faith and why like faith is really important in your life and like God and all these things is because like worship is powerful. And if you're worshiping something good, but you don't have to, you believe whatever you want to believe. I'm just saying, relaying how I feel about these sorts of things. When you worship something good, that's good, because it gives power to it. You're giving power to something good. So do this for any skill you want to get good at, but try to have some element of ritual. Okay, nice. So that's really it. I just really wanted to talk about this. I hear about many curious people burning out in software. I assume that mostly due to work environment, though, or some other life imbalance. Yeah. So, by the way, yeah, you can ask me any questions now if anyone's here. I'm just chilling. So, like, because we sort of went through all of it. So, like, yeah, the burning out thing in software, it's really because companies suck. A lot of tech companies, you're working on something that kind of doesn't matter. You're working on something that kind of doesn't matter, and not all the time, but I'm saying in general, you're working on stuff that like kind of doesn't matter. And then you're in an environment where if you're curious, you're very useful there. So they need you a lot. And I see a lot of people getting grinded out simply because they're a cog in a machine and they hate it. Especially if you're a curious, creative person, and you're being a cog, it's gonna eat at your soul. It's gonna eat at you. Like I feel like I've had times where like I was like, I just need to like leave right now. I've left some pretty high paying situations because I was like, I'm gonna die here. I'm not saying do that. That's not advice. I don't want people to think I'm telling you to, but yeah, like quit your job. Quit your job. If you don't like it, yeah, quit it. Like, why not? Of course. I feel like it's kind of intuitive to do that, Like I think there is an aspect of no, I'm not gonna say that. I don't want people to think that I'm like, no, quit your job. If you are a single young man and you hate your job, what are you really doing? Oh, I gotta pay for rent. It's like, Do you? Or did you choose to live a life that is too expensive for your means? Like, are you living outside your means? Because for a lifestyle, like you don't want to spend your youth doing things that suck. That makes sense. And any other questions, comments? You asked me about jobs. I'm not going to tell you to do that. I'm probably going to tell you to quit your job. And I get it. Maybe school's another thing where it's like, I don't know. I mean, like I didn't do school, so it's like I remember the first day of like, because I was like, I didn't want to do college, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. And my dad was like, oh, you should try it out, because I was like, I'm just gonna, because I was already like I had internships and stuff in high school, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna like be a full-time engineer. I'm gonna start companies and all this. And I remember, and I went though. It was actually a really good experience going for. I went for a year because I made a lot of friends, and I ran the hackathon at the school, and like I had like a lot of good experiences. And but the thing that there's a moment in the what's it called when they like onboard the students in the reception or whatever. My brain's a little bad, but like there's a part where they were showing this. Oh man, this was so bad. I remember immediately I was like, oh, I'm just gonna drop out. So like, there was a moment where like they were showing us this video, and it was like on a beach, and the video was like social engineering related. It was like, this is like a social situation, and they're showing a bunch of 18-year-olds this, and they're like, okay, there's one guy, it's like a real life, and there's one guy dancing on the beach, and he's dancing really weird, and everyone's looking at that guy, and they're like, what's that guy doing? And then the commentator on the video is like, oh, here we have like a strange man who's deciding to go dance on this beach. It's very odd. It's like, and then and everyone thinks he's weird, right? But now look at what happens. And then you see another guy come up, and he starts dancing. And they're showing this to these 18-year-old college kids, and they're showing that guy starts dancing, and then everyone else, after the second guy started dancing, starts dancing weird like the first guy. And the video's like, you see social movements in life. It's not about the first guy, the leader. It's about the second guy. It's about the guy that validated that idea. And then everyone came along. I'm like, oh, they're training me to be a slave. I was like, oh, that's slave talk. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. No, the first guy matters. He did it. Like the first guy's the one that did it. It's like, no, it's never the second guy. It's never the second guy. Anyway. All right. Any last questions for everyone in the chat? Career questions, how to get good at coding, how to get a job, how to get contracts. I got like some time, probably like 20 minutes. The trick is to have the second guy paid off. Yeah. Now you're getting it, Art. The trick is for social movements, if you're willing to start a social movement, you have to just pay everyone to start it for you. And then everyone thinks something's happening. Now you're getting it. And that paid off person went to college. Like, why do you think all these entrepreneurs are dropouts? It's like, it's not the Reddit model. That is the Reddit model. So Reddit did that. Reddit had fake comments in the beginning and fake posts. And then everyone's like, oh, something's happening here. Nothing was happening. And now you have a site filled with how do we what's a good way to talk about Redditors? They're just like Redditors, you know the problem with Redditors? Analysis paralysis. I feel like the Redditor archetype is someone that like can outthink themselves out of life. Just look at like all the subreddits, like relationships, all these like subreddits. It's just people overthinking and just like having like really weird lives because of it. That's such a trap. But yeah, anyway, this is a good list. I'm gonna. It's true. All right. Thanks for joining. I think if you want to get good in general, I can also. Oh no, I'm gonna make this video. I can also start something in the Discord where we just talk about getting good. This is really important. All right, guys. Adios. It was fun. This was a quick one. I'll see you.